The wine was too warm. Clara noticed it the moment Gregory poured it, the dark red spilling into her crystal with a slack, unhurried confidence that told her he'd been drinking before he came home. Not much, just enough to take the edge off whatever he was about to do. She cut into her steak. The knife made a soft scraping sound against the Limoges plate, the kind of noise that felt too loud in a room where no one was really talking. Ethan was upstairs finishing a college essay. Sophie was at a friend's house. The house itself was quiet. The hum of the Sub-Zero, the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the foyer, the faint rustle of October wind against the windows. Gregory set down the bottle. "Good day at the office," he said. It wasn't a question. It never was. "Glad to hear it," Clara said. She took a sip of wine. Too warm, yes, but she drank it anyway. They had eaten at this table for 18 years. The table itself had been a wedding gift from her parents. French walnut, seats 12, polished every other week by a woman named Rosa, who had been with them since Ethan was a toddler. Clara could run her finger along the edge and find the faint scratch from when Sophie was 5, and decided to use a butter knife as a chisel. She could look at the head of the table and see Gregory, 28 years old, leaning across this same surface to kiss her before a dinner party, his cufflink catching the light. She didn't look at the head of the table now. Gregory ate for a while in the comfortable silence of a man who had already rehearsed what came next. Clara watched him out of the corner of her eye, the way he held his fork, the slight tilt of his head when he chewed, the faint gray at his temples that he'd started dyeing 3 months ago. She noticed everything. She had always noticed everything. It was the thing about her that Gregory had once found charming and now found irrelevant. He dabbed his mouth with the napkin, set it down, reached for the leather portfolio that had been sitting on the chair beside him since he walked. Clara's hand tightened around her. She didn't change her expression. "I've been thinking for a while," Gregory said, his voice even, almost, "that we should talk about the next chapter." "The next," Clara repeated. She kept her tone. Curious even, he opened the pulled out a stack of paper, neat, round, a blue tab sticking out. He laid it on the table between them, then slid it across the walnut with 2. The paper made a soft whoosh against the polished surface. It stopped in front of her. Clara. The words were small, formal, but she didn't need to read them to know what they were. She'd known for weeks. She'd known the moment Gregory started coming later, the moment he started wearing the moment he asked their accountant for a copy of the family office statements and didn't tell her. She'd known because she'd been the way you watch a storm build over Long Island. Quiet and inevitable, while everyone else is still grilling Burbeck. "Divorce papers," he said. He smiled. It was the one he used for investor meetings, for charity galas, for the Christmas show. Warm, full, slightly energetic, as if he were the one being in. "I know this is sudden, but I think it's the right thing. Us." Clara didn't read the papers. She took a nip of wine. "Sudden," she said. "I've been unhappy for a time, Clara. I do." He folded his table. "Agreement is fair. You keep the house? Well, no, actually, the house would be sold, but you'd have the proceeds to buy something suitable. The children's expenses are fully covered. You'd receive a monthly support payment that's more than generous. I've worked with David on the numbers. David Kowalski." "Of course." Clara set down her glass. She looked at the paper a long moment. Gregory didn't waver. He was proud of himself, she realized. He was proud of the timing, the preparation, the calm delivery. He had imagined this moment 100 times, and in every version, she cried, or yelled, or begged. She of those things. "Can I ask when you decided?" she said. "Does it matter?" "Humor me," he sighed, long suffering, a few months ago. "I wanted to make sure everything was in order. Anything. I didn't want to put you in a penalty." The irony was so precise it almost made her laugh. 7 days. She herself 7 days. Had said it was risky, that moving that much money that fast would leave traces, but Clara had told her the same thing herself now. Wouldn't look. Not yet. He was too busy feeling like the clean exit. He would notice eventually, but by trust would be funded. The accounts would be closed, and the money would be sitting in structures even David Kowalski would need to unpick. $1,000,000. Out of his reach, 7 days before he slid a stack of paper across the dining table with a smile. "I'd like to read these," Clara said. She reached papers, slowly, and were heavy. "You don't mind?" "Of course." Gregory stood onto the table. "Take your time. There's no rush. Study if you have questions." He walked out of the dining room. Clara listened footsteps on the hardwood, the soft click of the closing behind him, down at the papers. Her name was on the first page. Clara Hay, respondent. The date was today. The filing was in Stamford. She flipped through the page quickly, not reading, just expected to find. The asset disclosure was incomplete. The family office account was listed at a fraction of its actual value. The offshore structures weren't mentioned at all. He'd been thorough in his own way. Just not thorough. She set the papers down. Finished it. From the she heard Greg's phone buzz. Then again, faster. Then his voice, not loud, but sharp, the way it fit his calculation. The account, held by the closed door. Another glass of wine. It was too warm. She drank it anyway. Gregory didn't come back to the dining room. Clara heard him on the phone in the study, his voice low and clipped, the way he talked to his traders when a position was moving against him. She couldn't make out the words, but she didn't need to. She knew the rhythm. She'd heard it 18 years ago, in the spare bedroom of their first apartment in Stamford, when he'd lost $40,000 on a single trade and spent the night on the balcony staring at the parking lot. She stacked the plates, carried them to the kitchen, ran the water. The dishes clinked against the stainless steel sink, and for a moment the sound was so normal, so domestic, that she could almost pretend the papers on the dining table were just another bill. The study door opened. Gregory's footsteps crossed the hallway. He stopped in the kitchen doorway. Clara. She kept washing. Yet? The family office account. The one at Northern Trust. Do you know anything about which one? She turned off the water, dried her hand. We have set the joint investment account. The one we set up in 2019. Oh, that. She turned to face him. He was not much, just the way his jaw was working, the slight flaring of his nostrils. He was angry, but more than that, he was confused. Gregory hated confusion. What? There's been activity. Significant activity. What kind of activity? He stared. For a long time. She could see him doing the calculations in his head. Was she playing dumb, or did she genuinely? He wanted to believe she. It was the only version that. Money's gone, he said. A large amount. The bank says there were 3 transfers over the past. I didn't see it. You. She leaned again. Gregory, I haven't looked at those account months. You know that. You handle the finances. Always have. Look. And then she'd signed the transfer documents in the office. In a conference room on the 3rd floor. With a view of the Hudson that made the whole thing. Sorted this out. He walked away. She heard him go up the stairs. The second door closing. The nose. Not the full amount yet, but things wrong. Maggie replies later. Expected. Don't engage on the account. Let him dig. The longer he spends figuring out the structure, the more time we have. Also, I found something. Call me tomorrow, 9 a.m. My office. Sarah stared at the message. Maggie didn't use italics for emphasis. She used line breaks. I found something, with a pen meant it was big, the phone down. Looked around the kitchen. The dishes were done. The counter stairs outside. The dining room. Picked up the divorce papers. Sat at the table them properly this time. The proposed settlement was halting in its precision. The house, sold, split 60-40 in his favor. The children's tuition, covered through college, he controlled. The spousal support, $15,000 a month, 5 years, then terminated. No mention of Bennett Capital Partners. No mention of the offshore accounts. No mention of the art collection. The wine cellar. The ski house in Vermont. The apartment on the Upper East Side that she decorated but whose deed was an entity she'd never heard of. Planning this for a year. At least, she set the papers down. Heard the shower, watching David Kowalski walk in with 3 associates and a rolling briefcase that looked like it contained the contents of a small library. Gregory wasn't there. He was in New York, managing a client situation, according to Kowalski. Clara thought that was convenient. She also thought it was typical. Gregory had never liked being in rooms where he couldn't control the temperature. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose and the expression of someone who had seen every version of this argument and was tired of all of them. Kowalski stood first. The respondent has, within the past 7 days, transferred approximately $500 million from a jointly held investment account into irrevocable trust structure located outside this jurisdiction. We believe these transfers were made in anticipation of divorce proceedings and constitute dissipation of marital assets. Maggie didn't stand. She kept clicking the pen. Ms. Chen? The judge. The transfers my client authorized were made into trusts for the benefit of the parties' minor children. My client is the trustee. The assets were never removed from the fee. They were moved from an account, over which the petitioner had unilateral signing authority, into a structure that protects them from exactly the kind of dissipation Mr. Kowalski is alleging. Furthermore, the petitioner's own financial disclosure, filed with this court 3 days ago, fails to list approximately $300 million in offshore entities. I'd ask the court to consider who, exactly, is dissipating. The judge's eyebrow went up. She looked at Cookie. Is that accurate, Mr. Cookie? Your Honor, those entities are separate corporates. Are they beneficially owned by that predate the merit are not, Mr. Cookie? The judge took off his answer question. A long pause. Your Honor, then they go on closure. Amended disclosure by next Friday. As for the RO, the trusts are funded, the money is not leaving the country, and the children are the best. I'm not freezing them. I am, however, ordering both parties to refrain from any further transfers of marital assets pending. And I'm appointing a forensic accountant. Jointly retained, jointly paid. Whoever's hiding what, going to find it. The gavel. Sarah exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd round one to us. But he's going back harder. She was right. By Monday, the call started. From Gregory. From people Clara had known for years. The president of the junior league, asking if Claire okay, and mentioning that the holiday gala co-chair position might need to be reconsidered given head of school, calling to say that Sophie's tuition arrangement viewed. A woman she'd sat next to at every benefit dinner for a Is it true Gregory's seen? Greg working the room. Greenwich was a small town it wanted to be, and Gregory had lived there long enough to know exactly well. He was telling their version of the story. Clara was unstable. Clara had taken the money. Clara was keeping the other. It was elegant, really. By the time anyone fact-checked it, the narrative already settled. Tuesday. He came home from school, dropped backpack in the foyer, and stood in the kitchen doorway with pockets. Did you take Dad's money? Clara was making tea. The kettle whistled. She turned it off. It was just your father's money, Ethan. She turned to face him. Taller than her now. He had Grace's jaw and her eyes, and he was looking stranger. You and I built that together. Some of it was his money to begin with. He was going to leave us with almost nothing. I didn't steal anything. I protected your sisters. Did you know he was going to ask for a divorce? She hesitated. One beat too long, Ethan's face changed. You knew, and you didn't say anything. You just money and waited. I was checked. I know. He picked up his backpack. To Jake's, he left. The front door slammed. Sound echoed through the house. Claire for a long time. The tea got cold, didn't drink it. That night, she sat in her car in the parking lot of the Stop and Shop on East Putnam and cried. Not quietly, not the controlled, dignified crying she did in bathrooms at parties. The other kind, that made your shoulders shake and your nose run and you couldn't breathe because you were trying not to make noise in a parked car grocery store parking lot at 9:00 at night. When it was over, she wiped her face with a napkin from the glove compartment, blew her nose, started the car. She drove, parked in the garage, sat there for another minute. Then she pulled out Harold Finch's number. She'd had it for years. Gregory's partner, the quiet one, the one who always brought wine to dinner about the kids and never. She texted him. Harold, it's Clara Bennett. I'd like to meet. Somewhere It's about Gregory and the firm. He wrote in 2 minutes. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Bar at the Delamar, Southport. Ask for me at the hotel stand. Clara put down, stared at the garage wall, didn't know what Harold would tell her. She didn't know if he'd even go up. But she knew. She was done reacting. It was time to start playing. The Delamar in Southport was the kind of hotel bar that was designed for conversations you didn't want overheard. Low ceilings, dark wood, booths with high backs, jazz playing just loud enough to fill the gaps. Clara sat at a corner table with a glass of seltzer and waited. Harold was 5 minutes early. He slid into the booth across from her, ordered a bourbon neat, and didn't waste time. You move the money, he said. Hello to you too, Harold. Gregory's been on the phone all week. He's convinced you had inside help. He's going through his IT department, his bankers, his accountant. He hasn't looked at me yet, but he will. Are you on his side or mine? Harold smiled. It was tired. I'm on the side of the fund not collapsing, which is why I agreed to meet you. He took a sip of bourbon. You should know what you're dealing with, Clara. The divorce is the small part. She set down her glass. What does that mean? It means Gregory hasn't just been hiding money from me. He's been hiding losses from his investor. The room got quieter. Or maybe it was just her ear. Last quarter, Harold said, we took a position in a distressed debt fund. It went bad. $40 million bad. Gregory didn't disclose it to the LP. He covered it by moving money from the family office co-investment pool, the same pool you just emptied. He was going to replace it before anyone noticed. But then you took the rest of the money out, and now there's a hole. A big one. Clara's hands were cold. 40 million. 40 million. And that's just the one I know about. I've been asking questions for 6 months. He's been shutting me out. The offshore accounts? Some of them aren't just hiding assets from you. They're hiding performance numbers from the people who invest. Why are you telling this? Because if the fund blows up, everyone loses. You, me, the LPs, the trust. Grabs it. That's why he's been in such a hurry to get this done. He needs to stabilize the balance sheet before the next investor meeting. He was counting on that family office money to... Harold forward. You took his pay, Clara. And now he's going to come after you with everything he has because you didn't... You took his... Clara thought about the court on Friday, about Kowalski's wrong briefcase, about Gregory not showing up because he was managing a client. He wasn't client. He was being a crater. There's more, Harold said. Lauren Pierce. You know who she is? Claire's jaw tightened. I know. She's not his girlfriend. She's been running the offshore entities. She knows where every dollar is. And she's keeping records. Email, recordings. I don't know why. Maybe she's planning to leave. Maybe she's planning to blackmail him. Maybe she's just careful. Whatever her reason, she has the evidence that could put Gregory in him. Have you talked to her? She, last week. A deal. Gives me the evidence. I make sure she keeps her job on. About it. Clara. I'm telling you because you know the landscape. There are 3 people with leverage in this room right now. You, me, and Lauren. Gregory thinks he's with all the cards, but he's holding a deck that pieces. Clara stared at him. What do you want, Harold? I worry out of the fund, quietly, with a settlement that keeps the LP's calculators away. I want to run the firm the way it should have been run, and I want to get what you're owed, because if you don't, you burn the whole thing down. Afford that. It was honest. Brutally so. Most respected it. Let me think about it, she said. You don't have much time. The LP meeting is November 14th. That's 3 weeks. If Gregory can't go clean numbers by then, someone's going to start asking questions. If they start, they won't stop. They parted ways. Clara drove home with the window down, the cold on her face. She was happy when her phone... Maggie. Check your mail, Maggie said. Letter from the SEC. Clara's stomach dropped. What? Informal inquiry. Addressed to you personally. Someone reported suspicious activity in the family office account. They want records, for now, but if they smell something, it's being voluntary. Hold off at the next exit. Her hands were shaking. Maggie, if the SEC traces that money back to the fund, I know. We need to talk. Tomorrow. First thing. And Clara, whoever will help you. Clara sat in the parking lot of a gas station, on the highway behind her. She thought of Harold, about Lauren, about Gregory with the phone to his ear. 3 people, and now a 4th, the federal government. She didn't know who had sent the letter, but she knew one thing. The game had just changed. No longer the only one hunting. Maggie's office on the 43rd floor looked different in the morning light. The Hudson was gray, the sky was gray, and Clara felt gray too, sitting across from a woman named Janet, who Maggie had brought in overnight, a white-collar defense lawyer with short hair and the calm of someone who had seen the inside of a grand jury and lived to talk about it. Here's the situation, Janet said, laying out a single sheet of paper. The SEC inquiry is about the family office transfers. Right now it's voluntary. They want statements, transfer records, trust documents. If they determine the transfers were designed to conceal fraud at Bennett Capital, they could subpoena everything. And if they subpoena the trusts, a judge could claw back the money. Even though it's for the children, Clara said. Especially because it's for the children. Fraudulent transfer law doesn't care who the beneficiary is. If the money was moved to keep it away from creditors or regulators, it can be reversed. Clara closed her eye. $500 million. She'd moved it to protect her children. Now it might be the thing that destroyed them. How much is at risk? Maggie asked. Hard to say. If the fund's losses are limited to the $40 million Harold mentioned, and the transfers can be shown to be legitimate estate, we might be fine. But if there are more losses, if the SEC finds a pattern of concealment, then any transfer connected to the fund's assets is exposed. Janet paused. Between 1 and 200 million could be clawed back. Maybe 1 to 200 million. Clara did the math. The Children's Trust would still have 300 million. That was more money than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. But it wasn't the point. The point was that Gregory had built a house of cards and she'd pulled one from the bottom, and now the whole thing was falling, and she was standing under. What do you do? She said. Janet looked at Maggie. Maggie looked. You stopped playing defense, he said. You've been reacting since Tuesday. Gregory files, respond. The SEC writes, you gather documents. It's time to make him react. How? Gregory's weakness isn't the money. Story. Maggie forward. He tells everyone he built Bennett Cap nothing. Ohio Kid scholarship worked his way up. It's his brand. It's why investors trust him. It's why the Greenwich wives smile at him at parties. But it's not true. Your father introduced him to his first 3 investors. Your seed money funded the first year of operations. You ran the operations side for the first 3 years while you raised capital. If the story comes out, if the LPs learn their self-made genius was bankrolled by his family, his credibility collapses. And if his credibility collapses, the fun with it. Clara thought about it. You want me to identity? Use the truth. He's been using lies you for months. Turnabout. It was a weapon. Clara could feel it in her hands. Heavy, dangerous. If she used it, she wouldn't just win the divorce. She'd erase the version of himself that Gregory had spent 20 years building. And she thought about East Doorway. About Sophie, who still hadn't called her since the papers were served. I need to make a phone call, she said. She called Gregory's mother. Eleanor Bennett lived in a retirement community outside Columbus, Ohio. She was 76, sharp as a tack, and she had never approved of men of Clara. Clara knew this because Eleanor every Christmas, in a whisper, I had left the room. You're too good for him. Clara. Always have been. The phone rang twice. Clara, I was wondering when you call. You knew? A mother knows. Gregory called last week. You were getting divorced. Said you'd taken handling it. Eleanor paused. He sounded like his father. A good sign. I need your name it. I need you to tell the truth. About the early days. About my father's investments. About the fact that Greg that company alone. A long silence. Then, Clara, I lose my son. You already lost him, Eleanor. Lost himself a long time ago. Another. Then a sigh. Tell me whatever you need mine. But Clara, when this is over, don't make me Clara hung up. She sat in Maggie's office, gray light coming through the window. Things shift inside her. Not confidence. Something harder. Resolve. Her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize. A text. It's Lauren. Thing you need to hear. Meet me. Today, 5 p.m. The Starbucks on 50X. Come alone. Clara showed that to Maggie. Maggie frowned. Don't go alone. I'll wear the wire you. Maggie. Then, at 5 o'clock, Clara in a Starbucks on East 57th, mixing a latte that was too hot, while Lauren chair across from her. Clara had expected. 32, but she looked younger. No makeup, a hoodie under a blazer. She looked like a cop had wandered into the wrong meeting. Probably wondering why you here. Lauren said, I'm wondering why you've been recording husband. Lauren didn't flinch. Because I'm not an idiot. Greg Bennett doesn't leave women, he discards them. I've seen him do it to assistants, to analysts, to a woman in marketing who got pregnant to spend time with her family. I knew what I was getting into. I'd make sure I had a way out when the time came. She pulled out her phone. Last month, Gregory told me to delete emails. Specific emails about the offshore transfers and the loss. He said if anyone asked, I didn't. I recorded the conversation. She slid across the table. Clara picked it up. Pressing play, Gregory's voice, low, urgent, used when he thought no one was listening. Lauren, listen to me. You delete those emails, all of them. The April transfers, the May reallocation, all of it. If anyone finds those, we're finished. Do you understand? Finished, Lauren's voice. Gregory, if I delete them and then you say you don't know. You say you're following orders, but the emails don't exist. Got it? Click the recording. Handed the phone back. Why are you giving this to me? She said. Because I want out. I want a letter of recommendation, a clean enough money to start over in another city. And I want Gregory to know the one who did this. You, me. Lauren's eyes were hard. He told me I was sure. He told me his wife was a ghost in the I want him to know the ghosts. Clara looked at her. She should have felt anger. She should have felt betrayal. Instead, she felt something close to recognition. 2 women, both used by the same, both finding their own not be discarded. I'll lawyer, Clara said. But if this were real and we use it, Gregory goes down. And you go down with him, at least perfectly. No one hires the woman who recorded her boss. I know. That's why I have money. And the warrants. And then here, Clara stood. Be in touch. She walked out of the Starbucks. The city was dark now, lights on, the crowds of commuters rushing. She pulled out her phone and called Maggie. I have the record, she said. And Gregory's mother is on board. I want to make an offer. 48 hours. If he doesn't take it, we go to the SE, the LPs, and the press. I know what it costs. I'm ready to pay it. She hung up, walked to the corner, waited for the light to change. 48 hours. She wondered if Gregory would even recognize the sound of his own empire cracking. Gregory's response came in 12 hours, not 48. It came at 6:17 in the morning, in the form of a process server knocking on Clara's front door, with a stack of papers and a neutral expression. An emergency motion for psychological evaluation. A request for temporary sole custody of the children. A defamation claim, citing false and damaging statements made to third parties regarding the petitioner's business practices. And a letter from Kowalski, EC'd to the Hayes family attorney, suggesting that the Hayes family's interference in the marriage would be made public. He was attacking everything. Her mental health. Her children. Her family name. It was Gregory's style. When cornered, he didn't defend. He expanded the battlefield until you were fighting on so many fronts you couldn't remember what you were fighting for. Clara read the papers at the kitchen table while the coffee brewed. Her hands were steady. She'd been expecting something like this. Not the specifics, but the strategy. Gregory had always been a man who believed the best defense was a good offense, and he had the money to keep the offense going for years. Maggie called at 7. I saw the filing. He's trying to scare you. It's working a little. Don't. The psych eval is a joke. Judges hate that tactic. The custody claim will get laughed out of court. The defamation is frivolous. The Hayes family thing is a bluff. Kowalski knows that if he drags your family into this, we drag his client's offshore accounts into the light. He's posturing. Then why does it feel like I'm... Because you're... Get rest. We're meeting at my office at 9. Janet's coming, and Harold is sending a representative. We finalized the offer today. The offer was 3 pages. Clara read it twice before she did it. The terms... Clara would not submit the recording, the offshore evidence, or the fund loss documentation to the SEC or the ELP committee. She would not speak to us. She would withdraw any objections to... In exchange, the $500 million remained in the Children's Trust, jointly. Clara received the Greenwich house, the Vermont house, and a one-time payment of $25 million. Gregory would step down as CEO of Bennett Capital Partners effective December 1st, with Harold Finch as sole. An independent auditor would review the fund's books and present findings to the ED, and both parties would sign a mutual non-disparity. It was not the most money Clara. If she'd a trial, if she'd burned the ground, she might have walked away with twice as much. But the children would have lost their father, the LPs would have lost their savings, and Clara would have become the thing Gregory had always accused her of being, dangerous. Maggie sent it to Kowalski 30. The mediation was at 2 p.m. in a conference room on the 52nd floor of a building. Clara walked in with Janet. Gregory was already there, with Kowalski and... Harold sat at the end of the table, silent observer, his hands in front of him. Greg hadn't slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his tie was loose, and the gray at his temples was showing, the dye out. He looked at Clara with an expression she hadn't seen in years. You're trying company, he said, before... I'm trying to take what's mine, said. The company was yours. Kowalski put a hand on Gregory's arm. Let's let this work, Greg. The process hours. About the house. They are the ski house. They argued about the wine collection and the dog, a golden retriever named Biscuit, that Sophie had bought 3 years ago, and that Greg walked. They argued about the children's holiday schedule and college tuition, and whether Sophie could continue school. They did not recording. Kowalski had heard it. Clara's team had sent a transcript that morning. He knew. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The recording was the elephant in the room, and everyone was walking it very carefully. At 8, they hit a wall. I won't step down, Gregory said. His voice was hoarse. The company is mine. I built it. You can have the money. You can have the houses. You can have whatever you want. But the company sees. Clara looked at him. Really looked at him. She saw the man she'd married in that face. The hungry kid from Ohio who'd wanted the world to taste it. Saw why she'd loved him. And she saw, with a clarity that hurt, that the company wasn't a company to him. It was his soul. If he loved, he didn't know who he was. Gregory, she said, your investors find out about the losses. They're going to find out about the offshore accounts. They're going to find out about the $40 million move to cover a bad trade. The only question is whether they find out from Harold, in a controlled presentation that keeps the fund intact, or from the SEC, in a courtroom that destroys everything. If you step down now, you keep your reputation. You keep your remaining shares. You keep your relation children. If you don't, she let the sentence hang. Gregory stared at her. The conference room was silent. City lights were on outside the window, touching down to the river. You'd really do it, he said. You'd really down. I don't too. But I will. Because you taught me something, Gregory. You taught me that the person who's willing to lose everything is the person who wins. Already lost everything that mattered. He looked at Kowalski. Kowalski gave him, take the deal. He looked at Harold. Harold said, he looked back at Clara. The dog, he said. Clara almost left. You hate dog. Sophie loves the dog. If the dog is at your house, she'll want to be at your house. Gregory, the dog, or no deal. Clara looked at Maggie. Maggie, fine, Clara said. But you're walking him. Gregory actually smiled. It was small and tired, and not the investor smile or the Christmas card smile. Something from before. The papers at 9:47 p.m. Clara signed at 9:48. Coized. Harold witnessed. When it was done, good. He put on his jacket. He looked at Clara across the table. You were always gave you credit. He said. I know, she said. He left. The conference room door closed behind him. Clara sat at the table for a long time. Papers were signed. That's done. She should have relief. She should have felt. Instead, she felt hollow, after a scream that no one hears. Maggie put a hand on her shoulder. You did good, did I? You protected your kids. You got out. You did him. That's more than most people man. Clara nodded. She stood. Walked to the elevator. The next morning, she went to the house to pack a few things. Greg's city, and the house was quiet. She went in study to return a set of keys, and that's when she saw it. In the top drawer of his desk, under a stack of business cards, was an envelope. Yellowed at the edges, handwritten, writing. She recognized it immediately. It was a letter she'd written in 2007 during the financial crisis, when Bennett Capital was 6 months from collapse and Gregory was working 18-hour days, and she was pregnant with Ethan and scared. She'd written it at 3 a.m, sitting on the bathroom floor, because she couldn't sleep, and she knew whatever happened, she'd never given it to him, thought it was too sentimental, too weak. It up and thrown it away, found it. He'd kept it for 8. Clara had her in her hands. She didn't open it, didn't need to. Every word. She put it back in the drawer, closed it gently, walked out of the study. 3 months later, Clara set the table for 2. It was the same table. French walnut, seats 12, the faint scratch from Sophie's butter knife still visible near the center. But the house was different now. The master bedroom was hers alone, and she'd repainted it a soft blue that Gregory would have hated. The study was a sitting room with bookshelves and a reading chair and no desk. The guest room was where Sophie stayed when she visited, which was every other weekend and sometimes more. Clara put down 2 wine glasses, poured. The wine was the right temperature tonight. She'd put it in the fridge for 20 minutes, the way she liked it. Maggie was coming for dinner. They'd done this every other Friday since the divorce was final. Takeout from the Italian place on Sound Beach Avenue, too much wine, and a running commentary on Clara's new life, which consisted mostly of the garden, the book club, the fact that Clara had joined a gym and actually went, and the fact that she hadn't been on a date and didn't want to be. You should at least try, Maggie said, when she arrived, handing Clara a bottle of wine and a paper bag with bread. Not for marriage, for fun. You remember fun. I remember fun. I'm just not sure I remember how to have it with another person. They ate. They talked. Maggie told her about a new kid, a tech entrepreneur whose wife had hidden cryptocurrency in cold wallets across 3 countries. Clara told her about Sophie, who had finally agreed to go to therapy, and who had texted Clara last week. I think Dad was kind of a jerk. Clara had, not in a parked car this time, in her own bed, with the blue paint and the reading lamp, and it had been. Ethan was at college, NYU, Stern of all places. He'd called last week to ask about a finance concept he didn't understand, and Clara had explained to him, and, wait, you know this? And she, I know a lot of stuff, and there'd been a, and then he, I'm sorry I said you stole Dad. She told him it wasn't, not in the, but Gregory had moved to a condo in Ward. He was no longer seen. Harold had taken over and the LP meeting had gone as well as could be. The fund had paid a fine, disclosed the losses, and stayed. Gregory still owned shares, but he had no operational role. Clara saw him once at the grocery store and they'd passed each other in the seal. He'd been her. He'd said, Clara. She'd said, They'd both. It was the most civil conversation they'd had in. Biscuit the dog lived so fisted. Clara got visitation, which meant Biscuit came to the house every other weekend and shed golden hair all over. After dinner, after Maggie left, Clara sat at the dining, the wine glass full, the house quiet, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the grandfather clock, the wind goes. It was the same sounds as that Tuesday in October, but the silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of waiting for something to break. It was the silence of something that had already broken. She'd gone back to the house in November during the move and taken it. She'd kept it in a box in her closet, the box that contained her invitation. Ethan's birth certificate, Sophie's first drawing, a photograph of her and Greg on their wedding day. Young and sunburned and smiling like they had no idea what was coming. She hadn't read the letter. She didn't need to. She knew what it said. She knew that the woman who'd written it had believed in love and endurance, and the idea that if you held on long enough, out. That woman was gone. Clara warned her exactly. She just noticed her absence, the way you notice a room after the furniture rang. At the clock. 9:30, expecting anyone. Walked to the front door. Looked through the hole. It was Sophie, standing on the porch with a duffel bag and Biscuit acting sheepish. Mom? Clara opened the door. Dad's on a date, and I didn't want to be there when he came home. Can I stay? Clara looked at her daughter, 14 years old, wearing Gregory's old hoodie, her hair in a messy bun. The dog wagging owned the place. Of course, Clara said. Come, I'll make up the guest room. Sophie walked in. Biscuit trotted past them both and headed straight for the kitchen. Closed the door. Looked at the dining table. 2 wine glasses, one empty, one half full, but not washed. He thought about that Tuesday night, about the sliding across the table, about Gregory's smile, buzzing in the study. Full glass. Carried it to the kitchen, poured it down the sink. Then she went to the closet, took out the kitchen counter. She opened, found the letter, held it. She didn't burn it. She didn't tear it up. She put it back in the box, closed the lid box on the shelf. Then she went to the guest room, where Sophie was, and said, "Pancakes for breakfast?" Sophie looked. Chocolate chip? Chocolate chip. Cool. Clara went back downstairs. The house was quiet, but different. Sophie's music playing softly from the guest room. Biscuit was snoring in the hallway, and was set for 3 turning. Not 2. She turned off the dining room light. When upstairs, the bed was made. Blue paint glowed faintly in the dark. She lay down and stared at the ceiling. She didn't feel like she'd won. She didn't feel like she'd lost. She felt like someone who had walked through a long, dark hall and finally found a door. And on the other side of the door was a room she didn't recognize, but it was hers and the windows were open, and the air was cold and she closed her eyes. Somewhere downstairs, worked in his sleep, Clara smiled. And for the first time in a long time she slept.